Well, hey, everybody. Happy Thursday. Hope everybody is doing well. Shout out to all the amazing patrons that are keeping the Be Our Guest podcast rolling here during these crazy times of 2020. Thank you sincerely for being here, for supporting the show on the highest level. Hope you're enjoying the extra content. Hope you're enjoying Discord. I'm loving it. I'm kind of getting hooked. It's like the old days on the IRC chats from back in the 90s, if you're that old. It's just kind of a continuous stream of thought of our listeners and our podcast community. And we're having a great time. Like right now, I was working here in the office and I saw a lot of folks talking about Cobra Kai and Karate Kid. I saw Michelle and Andrea, and I've never seen the Karate Kid movie. I know I'm a terrible 80s fan, but it's just awesome talking about the discounts that were released yesterday. All that kind of stuff. So hopefully you're enjoying that. I've kind of moved some of the content over to the Discord because it's more interactive than the Patreon page, but I'll also try to use the Patreon page as well, obviously, to put this content up there, to do some polls, photos, and stuff like that. But getting ready for today's Mike in the Midwest, already up to episode 11. Can you believe it? And we're going to talk about some of the awesome moments I had in my teaching career as we are in the back to school time of the year. So let's get started. We'll get this out on your podcast feed as well. So make sure that if you haven't yet, scroll through the messages over at patreon.com/Be Our Guest Podcast. There's a post all about how you just have to do it one time, how you can add Mike in the Midwest, this private feed, into your podcast app. It's just basically it's a copy. It's just you copy the link and it'll come in just like the Be Our Guest podcast and any other shows you listen to, even though it's an exclusive feed. You can't grab this on iTunes typically. So it's pretty simple. So check it out. Let's get started. We're going to talk about my top 5 memories from teaching. Pretty cool stuff. I miss it. This is the stuff I miss. I don't miss it all, but I do miss this stuff. All right, here we go. Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome to episode number 11 of Mike in the Midwest, a mini podcast for the patrons of the Be Our Guest podcast, where I discuss what it's like to grow up here in the center of the United States of America in Missouri, a suburb of St. Louis. Hope you're doing well. The show is originally recorded here on Thursday, September 3rd, 2020. And today we're going to be talking about my top 5 memories from teaching. And if you've listened to the podcast for any length of time, which I bet you have since you're a patron, you will know that I taught elementary school and gifted education here in St. Louis for 17 years. I enjoyed it. Had a great time. I made my best friends in the world teaching. I had some awesome students, got to really do something I loved for 17 years. But, before we jump into these top 5 memories, a lot of folks ask, well, why are you still not teaching? Because I didn't typically retire. I was in my mid 40s. And so you don't really retire at that age. But as you know, I worked part-time as a travel agent. I worked full-time as a teacher, tried to squeeze in all that with being a dad and coaching and, running the podcast and the message boards and the Magical Mouse Radio at the time. A lot of stuff going on. And then in 2017, I was very, very lucky. Maybe you had a hand in this. Maybe you didn't. It was just a huge honor. I was named one of the top Disney-focused travel agents by the Unofficial Guide to Walt Disney World. Top 10 out of over 2,000 that were mentioned. And so because of that, I got a lot more exposure and a lot more opportunity to work as a travel agent. So I thought it's now or never. Chase your dreams, right? That's what I always told my students. You know what? Seize the day, work as hard as you can. Don't be afraid to take a chance. Trust your gut and just work your butt off until you get your dream. So I decided, you know what, let's do it. And so in 2017, it was really scary. I walked away from education, full-time into travel. And I thought it was a great time. I started doing, my analysis. Oh, well, Star Wars is, Galaxy's Edge is coming online. There's going to be new hotels. It's the best time to get in. And it was. Who saw 2020 coming? No, that's fine. We're going to make it. I appreciate you guys helping us get through this. But wow, 2020 has given a pause to lots of us that work in travel, but we're going to make it. Things are going to come around and it's going to be fine. So let's go back to when I taught. I started teaching just right around the year 2000 at Wedgwood Elementary. Is a little now in St. Louis where I taught. our elementary school was K through 6. I know it's a lot different in different regions of the world and different countries, wherever you're tuned in, but ours was a K through 6 school that was on the same campus with our middle school, which was called Cross Keys, that had 7th and 8th graders. Now, what's funny is this school that I taught at is where I student taught as well for part of my student teaching. I taught second grade there for 7 weeks as part of my student teaching. So I knew the principal and, had a lot of relationships there from student teaching. That was an amazing time. So I loved this building. And it was a great building, and it was right down the street from where I grew up in Fox Lake, across, maybe a mile down the road from my high school, even though they weren't in the same districts. They were in adjacent districts. But I loved it, and I just had the number one staff. It was actually known as the best elementary school in the entire district, had kind of the highest test scores, lowest discipline rates, and all that kind of stuff. So I was very excited to be teaching here. So when you're excited to be working in a building, is part of a team. And if you know my personality, I kind of like to be involved in just about everything, right? I wanted to be the student council sponsor, which I did with this teacher next door. We ran student council together. That teacher's name was Ms. Bullington, who is now Mrs. Rallman, my wife. We taught next door to each other for 9 years before I moved on to gifted education, and she went down to 4th grade. We were both 6th grade teachers for years and years together next door to each other, which was always fun. And it's kind of funny now, because before I get into those top 5 moments, I want to give a huge shout out to the teachers that are out there in our audience. And I know we have a lot of teachers that are patrons, a lot of teachers that are listeners in general of the show. I know that this year is unprecedented. I know it's rough. Right behind this wall is where my wife is teaching 4th grade to her students right now. As we speak, I can hear her. And I know it's a struggle, because teachers, especially in September, you may not be teaching mathematics. You may not be teaching English. You may not be hitting the science and the social studies quite yet. What you're doing as a teacher this time of year, the first 3, 4, 5 days, I had a book that I really believed in. It was called The First Days of School by Dr. Wong. You might want to check that out if you're a new teacher. It's all about establishing relationships, establishing procedures, getting things set up where you might not be teaching the academics right away, the first week, the second week. What you're doing is you're building a safe environment for students to achieve later on down the line, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. They're going to thrive, but you got to build relationships, and you got to build procedures into that immediately upon them arriving in the school. They got to feel comfortable, and they have to know exactly how your classroom works and establish that community. Kind of like we have here at the podcast. We have a great podcast community. People are helping each other out, no troubles. And it's awesome. That's why, because we all look out for each other. You do that in a 6th grade classroom. You do that in a 4th grade classroom. You do that in kindergarten. But the thing is, up until 2020, you do this in the classroom in person. You don't wait for the student to come into your classroom. You meet them in the hall. You shake their hand. You greet them. You tell them you're glad they're there. So all that said, because that's really not the topic of today's show. All that being said, I want to send a shout out to the teachers. I know my wife's working super hard right behind me. Her classroom is actually in Paige's bedroom, because we had to find a quiet place for her to do her online teaching. Not ideal, because we don't have this huge, mansion house, but we're making it work. She's working on a card table with 2 laptops and document cameras and stuff like that. But if you're out there, you are building those relationships, but I know it has to be terribly hard looking at, 25 rectangles, and that's all you see of your students, because I think being in person, it's easier to read the body language and to build relationships quicker. So hang in there. And if your students are on the other side of this, if you're a parent supporting this, please do support your students and help that teacher out, because that's going to be something that is, that's vital. It's going to seem like a struggle, I think, for the first couple of weeks, but I think once the technology is overcome, because I think that's a struggle I'm seeing with folks online, my wife as well, is that, it's easy to troubleshoot some kind of a problem on a computer when you're there in the computer lab, and you can look over the shoulder and see what they're seeing on their screen. Oh, obviously you didn't click on this tab. Well, when you're on the other side of it and you're maybe 30 miles apart, it's really hard to see what the problem is. So things are taking longer. Things are getting more frustrating, because, when you have 25 kids asking all different questions, and it's a mess. So hang in there, teachers, hang in there, students, and hang in there, parents. Parents, hang with those teachers. They're working hard. And remember, we're all in this together. But let's talk about the good days of teaching, which hopefully we'll get to sooner rather than later. I want to talk about 5 of the coolest events I did as a teacher at Wedgwood Elementary that I really, really enjoyed. And actually, I'll throw in one. I want to put one more on my list here before we get going. Uh, that I did it when I taught at the Gifted Center because it was it was crazy. All right, so at Wedgwood, I mentioned that my wife and I were in charge of student council. Now, one of the things our student council did every year around Thanksgiving time, and we had our 4th, 5th, and 6th grade student council reps in charge of this. We had a school-wide competition to bring in non-perishable food items and toys, unwrapped toys. And we'd start this big food and toy drive right around Thanksgiving, because that was the time like all the, the dry goods go on sale for Thanksgiving at the grocery stores and so forth. So we had, hyped this up. We had a TV show in our school every day. It was called Wedgwood TV. My buddy Dave and I taught it together. Or we were the anchors when we started off, then we turned over to the kids. But we got all the grade levels going against each other because we had 4 classes per grade level in this building. We had, 6th grade's got to win because we're the best, because Pam and I both taught 6th grade. But we'd, 2nd grade would come in. No. We're only 2nd grade. We can take you guys out. 1st grade wanted to beat 2nd. It was a big competition. You know what? That was awesome because everybody wins. And so our students would go by, our reps, our student council reps would go by every day right after the morning bell. We got carts from this grocery store called Shop and Save across the street. They would give us like 5 or 6 of their carts, and they would go down in each of the pods. We had 4 main pods at our building, and they'd go down to each classroom and just dump, take a tally. Okay, this class had 17 items today. This class had 6, and they'd throw them into the cart. And then everybody would bring the carts to the front of the school, and we'd have to stack this food. And I'm not kidding. The love of our community and how competitive our students were, we would get by the end of the drive, maybe 8 to 10,000 items in the front of our school. And you think I'm exaggerating. I am not. It was insane. We would have 8 to 10,000 items, talking like cans of peas, carrots, green beans were always a big hit, boxes of rice-a-roni, mac and cheese, all that good stuff. We'd have, ramen noodles always were a go-to if you really wanted to, if you really want to win, you buy a bunch of ramen noodles because they're cheap and you can get to count them as an item. That was kind of a hack I used for my class sometimes if it was close. But the thing was, everybody won. Like the kids were all excited about it. We show the tallies, as the kids went into the cafeteria, we had like a scoreboard we'd update every day. And it was just a win-win. It was awesome. So that's one of the things I liked because you knew you were making a difference. At the end of the drive, it didn't matter who won, who got the pizza party. We gave pizza parties like 1st, 2nd, and 3rd from Papa John's. But the whole thing is that our kids were being able to help people in their own community, which was awesome. And so I love that because we got to do a lot with that. Pam did a lot of the work. I was just kind of the voice on the TV and on the announcements. So she worked hard at that. Also, on the other side of that, we collected a ton of toys, like Barbie dolls and cars and just stuffed animals, all kinds of stuff. And what we did with that was that we took our kids, our student council reps, we went over to a place called Marygrove, which is for underprivileged kids that don't have, they've been taken out of the home. And so this is a home where they live in our community. And so it was eye-opening for our students to see that these kids are living in tough situations without parents in a group home. And we gave them these toys right before Christmas, and they were appreciative. Our kids would be like, oh, it's just a Barbie doll. Or our kids are just, it's just a little, remote control car that only goes 2 ways. These kids thought that was the coolest thing in the world. So getting to do that with 6th graders, 4th, 5th, and 6th graders to give them a dose of how grateful they need to be. Now, our kids were not rich by any means. We're in a pretty low socioeconomic part of St. Louis, but they had a lot more than these other kids. And so it was a good lesson in appreciation for myself too. It was good to see that. One of the other things, so that was number 1. I gotta get these things going if we're gonna make this a mini podcast. Number 2, and I'll put this video up again on the Patreon page and I'll drop it into the Discord server. When I worked at Space Camp, one of the lessons we taught our teachers to take back to their students at their home schools was to do what was called a Space Week. Turn your school into a learning center for 1 solid week, and everybody gets to go through and learn about space. So my buddy Dave, who taught 5th grade across the hall from me. Now, let me tell you real quick. Let me digress here for 1 second. We had what I call, if you were watching Big Brother, I would have called us the Core 4. It was myself, Pam, who taught next door, my wife. She wasn't my wife at the time. Dave, who taught, now we taught 6th grade, Pam and I. Dave, my good buddy, and still teaches to this day. He teaches fourth grade in the district I live in now. So he's moved out here. He taught fifth grade, and then Beth taught fifth grade as well with Dave, but she was great friends with Pam. So as Dave, Beth, Pam, and I, we were like the core four, and we did a ton of stuff together. I mean, we all weekends we spent together. We were together all the time. We were great friends. We still are. Anyway, so Dave and I both went to space camp in 2001. We came back. We're like, we're doing Space Week. They taught us how to do this. We're doing it. Man, we built this mock space shuttle in our gymnasium. The kids got to go through it. We did a mock space mission with laptops all set up as mission control. The kids read from scripts. We had a fog machine. We had an LCD screen showing a launch behind the space shuttle. And all throughout the week, we had stations set up around the gym to teach our kids, his fifth graders, my sixth graders, taught the younger kids, the kindergartners through the other fifth and sixth graders, all about, we had these stations like the constellation station. We'd teach them what a constellation is, and you would drop these probability counters, and then you would put dots wherever they dropped, and you'd make a constellation and name it. You know, it was your own constellation. We talked about building rockets with air and how rocketry works and all kinds of stuff. So I'll put the video up, but Space Week at Wedgwood, shout out to Dave Gentile. He was an awesome teacher, still is in Francis Howell. He really got that going, but man, that's one of my favorite things to do with my kids. On that same note, another one of my favorite things we did, and this was really a lot of Dave. This was more Dave. We did what were called astronomy nights at Wedgwood. So now this always made me nervous because we had to do it at like 9 o'clock at night. Again, not during school hours. And we did it outside. And what we did was we called Boeing, in St. Louis, McDonnell Douglas was a huge employer back in the 70s and 80s and prior to that, right? If you know anything about space, McDonnell Douglas built the capsules that the Mercury and Gemini programs used to go into space prior to the moon landings. They were built here in St. Louis. They were actually built in our school district, in the Ferguson, Florissant School District. That's where the Boeing building resides, which used to be McDonnell Douglas. So they're a pretty strong community. They sent Dave to space camp. They paid for part of my way to go to space camp. They're a good corporate citizen. So what we did was we reached out to Boeing and we said, we've been teaching these kids about space, but man, we don't have a telescope. We don't have anything like that, but we'd love to be able to show them what Saturn looks like through a powerful telescope. And so what we did, we reached out to them, and apparently Boeing has this astronomy club of their employees. It's an employee group that goes out through Boeing and does outreach to churches and schools and all the kinds of stuff. So we got these folks to come out, these Boeing employees, one night. And they brought these gigantic, the huge telescopes, portable telescopes, where we could look in the delight in these kids' eyes when they really got to see the rings of Saturn, or they got to see Jupiter, and they could almost see the red spot. Now, the thing was, you're always nervous because you had to have clear weather. So we were always sweating it, but we did this twice. And we got good weather both times. But what we did was, to make it even more fun, we had s'mores. We had fire pits. We had, I think we had music. Like some of the Boeing employees were actually, they had like a strings quartet or something. They were there playing. It was crazy. But the thing was, we did these things, our community came out. I think we scared and the thing was, our principal had sons the same age as Dave and I. So she kind of looked at us like surrogate sons, I think, and it really made the rest of the staff kind of crazy, because we always got away with murder, because we always had these great ideas and we did them, and she didn't care. She let us do these things. So we did this astronomy night, and I'm not kidding. It looked like a rock concert. There were cars everywhere. It was unbelievable. It was like, have you ever seen the movie Field of Dreams, like the end of the Field of Dreams movie where there's cars off into the sunset? It was like that. We were like, oh Lord, we thought we were going to have like 30 kids or families. We had like 300, but it was awesome because the community came out, got together. People were meeting each other, greeting each other, having a good time. And there was education happening, and there was kids getting their eyes open to something they would have never seen before. So thanks to Boeing. I love that we did astronomy night. That was big Dave Gentile do. I just kind of helped out on that one. So I love that. Another one of the things we did, I have 3 more real quick. I love this. We did this as a 6th grade incentive. We kids coming up. And the thing was, back in the day, a lot of our 6th graders, this isn't so true anymore, but they would go to Wedgwood in kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, and they would get up to 6th grade. A lot of kids stayed in the school for 7 years. It was very stable. And all the kids knew that when you got to 6th grade, you got to go skiing during school. Instead of going to school one day in January, you would go skiing. And you're like, Mike, This is Mike in the Midwest. This isn't Mike in the Rockies. This isn't Mike in the Grand Tetons. No, you're right. This is Mike in the Midwest. But what we did, this is what we call skiing in St. Louis. There's a golf course that's out to the west of us. It's still in St. Louis County. It's right next to our Six Flags, and it's called Hidden Valley. And in the summer, it's a golf course. But in the wintertime, about 20 years ago, about 25 years ago, they got the idea to make some more money. They got some snowmaking machines. And so they cover the golf course once it gets cold enough with fake snow. And then when it snows here in St. Louis too, so they get some real snow sometimes. And so once they get enough snow, they open up, and it's not mountain skiing, but it's skiing on a hilly golf course. And for us, man, that's awesome. I mean, it's pretty high. They got ski lifts and everything, nothing crazy, but they do have open air ski lifts. And so we take our kids out there as a kind of a PE type thing. And they had to, if you were some kid that was causing trouble all year, you didn't get to go. So it's an incentive to act, the right way. But we took them out there skiing, and it was just awesome because our kids, even for me, I mean, like I went skiing with that was kind of our work party when I worked at the skating rink. The owner would pay for us to go skiing and buy us pizza. That was always our Christmas party. But I mean, for our kids, they were never going to go skiing. Most of them, at least by the time they were 12 years old, I wouldn't have. When I was 12, I never got to go skiing. So we'd take them out there with the PE teachers, the 4 classes. And God, it was so funny. Because these kids, they all thought they were going to be the greatest skier. They all thought they were going to be, I don't know, Peekaboo Street or whoever, some famous skier. They all thought it was going to be a piece of cake, right? Because every 6th grader thinks they can do everything perfectly all the time. You put these long skis on these kids, these skis are like, 5 feet long on each foot, and they're crossing their tips and they're biting it head first. And they can't, they get on they eventually they had something called a magic carpet. They would just stand on, it would pull them up the bunny hill. But before that, they just had this like tow rope. And so you go over to the tow rope, you'd have to grab onto it. It's icy and it's hard to even grab onto. But once you do grab it and it starts pulling you up the hill, what would happen is you get all these 6th graders behind each other going up the bunny hill on the tow rope. But then one kid would cross their tips while they're going up the hill. They would bite it first, bite it head first down into the water, down into the snow. And then what happens is they just pile up behind them like a 28 car wreck, and it was just so funny. And the thing was, it wasn't about teaching the kids how to ski. It was just about exposing the kids to something they wouldn't get to do. I loved it. We took, Pam and I, Rosemary and Jane, our other 2 6th grade teachers. We had so much fun doing that. We'd get out there and just have a ball. And it was just a fun day away from school, but we look forward to it all year. So that's one of the things I really enjoyed doing, was going skiing in Hidden Valley. Another thing we did, this is another thing that I did with my partner, Pam, was we had talent shows at the end of every school year. So we were in charge of this. So we wanted to make sure the talent show was pretty good, because we presented this in front of the parents and in front of the entire school, usually a couple weeks before the end of the school year. We'd have tryouts for like 2 or 3 days before, after school, before the show, just so that we could whittle down the acts, because we would have our school had about 650 kids. We'd have so many people try out. And so it was so hard to kind of do cuts, to not put people in the show, but we had to do that. We had like a group of people that would kind of vote who was in, who was out. It was kind of like American Idol before American Idol, I guess, or America's Got Talent. But the thing about the talent show was that it was kind of cool seeing kids that maybe all school year were real quiet. They were introverts, and they'd get out there and they'd sing this song. And you're like, holy cow, where did this come from? Like, they're singing like a songbird. Or they would get out there and do some kind of dance, break dance, or, do some kind of magic trick. And you're like, what? Where did this come from? And it was just so cool to see kids. Because again, this is one of the things I really, really stress with my students. And it was, get out of your comfort zone and take a chance. You know what? You'll never know what you can do unless you take a chance. It's kind of like running a marathon. It's kind of a stupid idea for anybody to get out and run 26.2 miles, but give it a chance, give it a shot. You know what? If you wipe out at 17, you can't go any further. You tried. These kids get up in front of the entire school. I mean, 600 kids, their peers, parents everywhere, teachers, and they'd sing. I don't know if I had the courage to do that. I'm pretty stupid to do things like that, but they did. And they would just, and it was so awesome to see kids give it a chance and do things like that. So that was a talent show. I always hosted it. Pam was there with me, hosting it as well, but we had a good, she organized everything. She always called me the mouthpiece. So I was kind of the MC of the whole thing. Last thing I'm going to mention here on today's Mike in the Midwest, and I've done a lot of fun stuff. So if you want to hear more of these, I have more like little things, and feel free to use these in your school if you're a teacher when times come back, because I'd love to support you and give you some ideas. The last thing we did, now this was over at over at the Probe Center, which was our gifted education center that I moved to eventually. And my boss, again, I think I mentioned this, my boss, the principal of the center, was my best friend in high school's mom. So I knew her from way back in the day, and she knew all the trouble I got in high school because it was usually her son and I that got in all the trouble together. We were always hanging at her house. It was always in her basement. So she was my boss. So it was kind of easy there too. Now, one of the things we did was when the Wii came out. Do you remember the Nintendo Wii when that first came out? That was the game system that was so revolutionary, and I couldn't wait to get one. I got one from Christmas. Actually, Paige and I got it as a joint gift from Pam for Christmas. It was that game center where you held the Wiimote and you would like bowl, or you would move to activate the game, and it was awesome. I love Wii bowling. I played. So let me inside story. After I got that on Christmas, I played it so long that my arm hurt so bad I had to take Tylenol just so I could keep playing. And I played like for 8 hours. My left arm had never, I pitched a lot, and my left arm had never hurt that bad from pitching as it did using that Wii game for like 8 hours straight. I had to keep changing the batteries. I was addicted. Anyway, when this came out, one of my students, we used to do something at Gifted at the Gifted Center. Every morning we'd watch something called the CNN Student News. Now, we did this when I was in 7th grade. When I was in 7th grade, we watched this program. It's a 10-minute quick hit of like what's going on in the world for social studies curriculum. And back in the day when I was in school, the teachers had to record this. Like, it was on CNN at like 2:58 a.m. So sometime when nobody's watching, you would set your VCR to record this little 10-minute segment in the dead middle of the night. And then the teacher would bring the VHS tape in the morning and play that day's CNN Student News. So we watched this. And of course, now when I taught, it was online. So we just pull it up on cnnstudentnews.com, and it's still there. It's called CNN 10. It's awesome. It's a cool thing for like middle school kids to kind of know what's going on in the world. Carl Azus, shout out. He's the host. Anyway, we saw this story about how elderly people could use a Wii to stay active, to get, because folks that are older might not be able to go to the bowling alley anymore, but they could use this Wii, even in a wheelchair, to go virtual bowling. This was like the first virtual stuff. And so one of my students said, Mr. Rahman, you know what we should do? We should raise some money and buy a couple of Wiis, go give them to a nursing home, and just donate them. And on top of it, but we could show them how to work it so that we don't just drop it off. We actually get there and explain it and show them. I'm like, you guys are awesome. Let's do it. And so we did a fundraiser. I forgot how we raised the money. I think it was around Valentine's Day. We sold what are called heartograms, little, love notes I could send to their, to whoever it is, their love of 5th grade or 6th grade. We called them heartograms. They came with like a Hershey Kiss or a little candy bar. Anyway, so we sold those, got enough money to buy a couple of Wiis, and we went to a nursing home that was in our district. And we reached out to them. I thought, that's a great idea. That's awesome. So I only had like 6 or 7 kids in my gifted classes. I combined a couple, had about, 17, 18. So we went over to the center, and a bunch of the residents came down. The nursing home made a big deal out of it. And so the residents came down. They were, using walkers and canes and wheelchairs and stuff. And they were just excited to see kids. I'll tell you that, man. Just seeing, even if they didn't have kids that came and visited them, getting to see kids that were like from 10 to 12 years old and their energy, they were pumped. They didn't care what we were bringing. They just want to see people and see kids and talk to them. And so I encourage my kids, it's like, you need to sit down and talk to these people. They have experience. Some of these are veterans. Some of these people are former police officers or firemen, people that were former teachers, lawyers. If they want to talk to you, sit your rear down and listen. They want to talk to you, give them the time. So they did that, and then we had lunch with them, but we set up the Wii, and the funniest thing is that at first they're like, oh Lord, like me, like I was, averse to new technology sometimes. And so we set up this Wii, and it's, and of course my kids want to play it, right? Because it's a video game system, and they had a huge big screen TV for all the residents to watch. So we hook it up on this giant big screen TV. My kids were all like fighting over it. They want to play it, but this was the hook. You saw the residents, the elderly folks, kind of around the outside, like, I want to do that. And then my kids would reach out to the residents and say, would you like to give this? And we start off with bowling, because bowling seemed like the most universally enjoyed game that everybody could like. So then you would get these residents. And I remember this lady in a wheelchair. She got up there and she, couldn't stand anymore, but she could do the Wiimote to bowl. And just seeing her face light up. And eventually what she told us was she bowled in bowling leagues, mini bowling leagues back in the day. And this brought back memories. And then you had her bowling against another resident. And what happened is, after we left, we kind of gave them the basics, how to put the disc in. And the staff could do this for them, how to charge the remotes and so forth. And it was just cool to see them reliving virtually some of the things they did, because it had like bowling and, golf. It had a golf game and so forth. It was just cool. And so we went back, I think a month later, and they were just so excited. They even made a league in the home. Every like Wednesday night, they had like a bowling league. They had so many people wanting to do it. So they did a virtual bowling league on the Wii with this Wii that we donated to them. My kids were so excited. I was so excited. They were so excited. That's what we need more of, I think. And those are the kind of things that I miss about teaching. I don't miss the grading. I don't miss the administrators for the most part. I think that education kills teachers with paperwork and with testing and with, just keeping everybody accountable, which I understand. But good teachers do good things and get the job done. And, if I were in an educational setting right now, I don't know if I could do hardly any of these things anymore, because they would say, oh my God, you're taking a whole day away from learning. You're not teaching, how to find, how to have a 2 variable equation and how to solve that. That's what administrators for the most part look for right now. But you know what? I guarantee you, if I reach out to my 6th graders back then, who a lot of them are now married and have kids of their own. I know I'm old. They're going to tell you, God, I remember that day we gave that Wii to the residents. I remember that day we went skiing. I love doing the food drive. That was so hard packing all those dry goods, but it was such a good feeling. All these things, in education are so cut and dry that and it's not the teacher's fault. And it's not even the administrator's fault. But I think we got to look more globally, that it was really hard to say what my kids learned that day at the nursing home, setting up a Wii and showing elderly folks how to use it. But I guarantee you it's a lesson they needed to learn that day. It's just not in any checklist. It's not in any verification sheet. And so as we get through, these rough times, beginning of school year 2020, where things are not easy, we're all in this together and things are going to bounce back. Things are, we're going to be able to do these things again. We're going to get together again. We're going to huddle up again. We're going to all be in the same room, rallying 300 people together, all for the same cause. So just hang in there. And I just want to share these things because, I mean, as much as I like being a travel agent, I do miss the fun stuff of teaching. There's a lot of fun stuff in it. So hope you enjoyed today's episode. I want you to comment below what are some of the cool things maybe you've done as a teacher, maybe your kids have done in school, and share those. And I'll put those out at the beginning of episode 12. Again, thanks for being a patron. Thanks for letting me live my dream and keep this going through these tough times in travel. We're going to make it because of friends like you. I appreciate you so very much. So see you over on the Discord. If you don't know how to get there, just send me a message. I'll get you the link. I want to talk to you on the Discord and have some conversation. We have a great community. So until next Thursday, this is Mike in the Midwest. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you real soon.